morning, everybody.
Morning.
Hello.
Mr. Gupta, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, Vivekji. Oh, you are there. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. I was just trying to coordinate.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get used to the difference between a Zoom and a webinar. Not very video savvy. Am I? So, Namit, when do you want us to start? I mean, I'm ready with.
Yeah.
You are ready.
Just a moment. I'll just recheck and then I'll just start. Give me a moment. I'll just.
Yeah.
Yeah. So should I start? Should we start? All are there. Take. I'm starting. So I think we will start. There are already joiners. Good morning, and on behalf of MCCI, I welcome all of you to this important webinar today, where the topic of discussion is redefining retail post COVID-19. In our day-to-day business, we build various future scenarios and try and predict every possible outcome so that we are ready with some or the other strategy to combat the challenge. However, the ongoing situation is something which is something unique we have never anticipated. So the biggest challenge is uncertainty about the future outcome related to our business behind a host of other factors. Coming to retail industry, the question coming to our mind is how will COVID impact the retail buying behavior of consumers in the country? I must say, if manufacturing is the backbone of the economy, then retail is its face. To understand and to get ourselves prepared for post-COVID challenges and limitations in retail, we have with us a host of eminent and experienced panelists from the industry today. Before I introduce them and hear them out, I would request our President MCCI, Mr. Vivek Gupta, to share his thoughts. Vivekji, now I think you should address.
First and foremost, a very warm welcome and good morning to all of you. This is today's webinar is the new normal that we keep talking about for the last so many years, and I think nature and technology have collaborated together to make this possible. That while we are face to face with each other yet miles apart, and this leaves a feeling of a new anticipated reality coming our way, that post-COVID, not only will things change for all of us, but things will change in a manner which we had not even probably anticipated, and all consultancies, all theories will probably be put to test. I would like to begin by thanking Sri Namit Bajoria, my colleague and elder brother, who has helped put this webinar together on behalf of MCCI and his council, the Retail Council. I would like to thank Sri Biju Kurian. I would like to thank Sri Jamshed Dabu, Vineet Gautam, Devendra Chawla ji, and Nilesh Gupta ji, for all of you for taking your valuable time coming and addressing our members and the public at large. I think more than everybody, all of us are looking towards you to understand what's going to happen as and when we open back. In fact, only I was reading a news item in my newspaper as well as in another paper that Akshaya Tritiya is around the corner, and that is one of the occasions where people actually go outside physically buy some gold or precious metal. And this year we know obviously that's not possible. So as marketeers, they've come up with an interesting solution that you buy it online, an email will come to you where you will receive that you purchased diamond today, that is on the day of the Akshaya Tritiya. The delivery will of course happen as and when the lockdown is lifted. So, I don't want to take much time. I know you all have a lot to say. We have a lot to hear from you people. The MCC, I just wanted to reiterate for everybody's benefit. It's a 120-year-old organization. It is one of the oldest chambers of commerce based out of Calcutta. We have more than 800 members. Our members are diverse from coming from all sectors, segments, and everything. The retail council that Namit Bajoria ji heads is one of the most vibrant councils that we have, dedicated to understanding the challenges of the retail industry and how we are going to, move ahead and do what about it. My only thoughts that I would request the panelists to, also throw light upon, that how do we see government supporting or not supporting us in a post-COVID situation? Because governments, I would request all participants to keep your speakers on mute, except for the speaker. Hello?
I think some participant is there. Please keep it on mute.
Yeah. So, because as we were seeing, the e-commerce people were first allowed non-essential items, and then they're not being allowed non-essential items. In a lockdown, a lot of people are at home, and suddenly they do feel that they should have bought the television set that they wanted or the refrigerator. And whether it is the Kirana store which is selling to them or the e-commerce person selling to them, as long as they are able to get a delivery, they don't mind. So with these thoughts, I would like to not take much of your time. I once again thank all of you personally on behalf of Merchant Chamber of Commerce to come. And also I apologize to you in advance that I might not be able to be there for the entire duration of the program. So I hope that once this COVID-19 is over, the lockdown is lifted, my dear colleague and elder brother Namit Bajoria will enable a physical meeting with all of you over a cup of coffee at some time in the future. With these words, over to you, Namit Bhaiya.
Thank you, Vivek ji, for such a nice thought. And of course, we'll make sure that once everything is back to normal, we'll organize a normal meeting which we used to have. With this word, let me introduce now to the panelists before we start the discussion. We have with us a very senior panelist, Mr. Jamshed K. Dabu. He is an independent advisor in the consumer, retail and hospitality space. He has recently completed glorious tenure as the managing director of Trent Hypermart Private Limited and had illustrious career of 34 years with the Tata Group, such as Titan and the Taj Group of Hotels. Then we have Mr. Vinit Gautam. He is currently the CEO and country head of Bestseller India, the Danish companies behind fashion brands like Jack & Jones, Vero Moda, Only, and Selected Home in India. Mr. Gautam has been with Bestseller for over 10 years and over 22 years of experience in the retail sector. Prior to assuming his current role, he has been with brands like United Colors of Benetton, Idea Cellular, Wills Lifestyles, Cafe Coffee Day, to name a few. Thirdly, in the panelists, we have Mr. Devendra Chawla, who is the CEO and Managing Director of Spencer's Retail. Prior to this, he has long, rich, and varied experience with various nationally and internationally reputed companies like Walmart, Future Group, Reliance Retail, Coca-Cola, and Asian Paints. Then we have Mr. Nilesh Gupta, who is the managing partner of Vijay Sales, who are pioneers in electronics and white goods retail stores in India. Nilesh has over more than 20 years of experience in building brands with rich insight into the retail scenario. Lastly, but not the least, we have with us our moderator, a very senior person, Mr. Viju Kurian, who is an independent advisor with over 37 years of experience in building brands, building businesses, and creating organizations. Well versed with brands and retail across premium companies in India, he was the president of Reliance Retail and CEO of Titan. Currently, he is involved as an independent consultant and member of the strategic advisory board of Alcatel Asia and serves as an independent director on several listed companies like Mindtree, Brigade Group, etc. So with this introduction, now the time has come. Yeah, Vivek ji.
Namitji, I think you are the host. You have the power to mute everybody.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. I think no, my secretary is handling it. I'll inform her. My secretary is handling it. I'll inform.
Keep having those disturbances.
Yes, yes, I'll do that.
So I think there's an option for you.
No, it doesn't have with me. It has with my secretary. I'm informing her. She'll just do it. She'll just do it. So thank you so much for joining in, and I hand it over to Mr. Biju Kurian. So now it is up. Now it is the game is, and the ball is with you. Thank you so much.
First, I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. Is that right?
Yep.
Right.
Sure. Perfect. Okay. So thank you both Mr. Bajoria and Mr. Gupta for the kind words of introduction, and as well as for the for setting the tone for reflecting on the retail industry and the state of retail post-COVID. And I think that's the title that we have created for ourselves for this particular panel discussion. But no subject like this is probably sensible without understanding what the COVID situation itself is, and from the COVID situation to kind of future. And I think, sorry, can you hear me? Okay. So no situation like this is understandable without the situation currently is, and then trying to guess what the situation in the future will be. So along with me, I have other panelists, and as you can see from their introductions, they have experience in consumer durables, they have experience in fast-moving consumer products, they have experience in hospitality, they have experience in apparel fashion. So, they bring together almost about 150 years of collective experience across all these various kinds of businesses. So despite whatever hat that they wear today, what they will be drawing upon is their collective experience of several industries across in the several years that they have spent. Let me first start with introducing two concepts. One is what I call as the butterfly effect, and the other is the black swan event. Now, all of us know what a butterfly is, and all of us have seen butterflies flutter around. So when a butterfly flutters around, it creates a little air wave underneath its wings. You imagine that you have 1 million butterflies fluttering around, and what happens? This air wave actually gets amplified, and then it becomes a much, much larger air wave to the extent that it finally becomes a tornado. So when you look at the current pandemic, what we should remember is what started off supposedly as the infection with patient zero in the world, which is one fish seller in the seafood market in Wuhan, today has affected more than 2.4 million people across the world and killed almost about 163,000 people across the world. So, and this is not just confined to, a few countries. It has taken rich countries and poor countries by storm. It has now reached 180 countries across the world. So this is what you call as a true global pandemic. Now, obviously, there is no cure for this at this point of time, which is proven. There is also a host of companies, more than 100 companies, which are working on trying to create a vaccine for this. Now, without a vaccine or without a proven cure, what tends to happen is that nobody has the confidence to be able to step out. One of the ways that they have realized that this pandemic actually spreads is through human-to-human contact. So what has happened is that they have decided that all humans will remain in lockdown. And lockdown means that no human will have a chance to meet another human, and thereby they will stop the spread of the virus from one person to another. Now, obviously, a lockdown is something which is a very, very different thing, because a lockdown is just not about humans. Humans constitute businesses, and the moment you have a lockdown, businesses get locked down. Governments get locked down. Facilities get locked down. Public utilities get locked down. However, a few concessions have been made in India in terms of ensuring that essential commodities and essential utilities will continue to operate even during the lockdown period. Demand has actually dropped and dropped quite significantly. Government revenues have declined drastically because what the government is expecting through GST is now almost a month and a half's revenues will clearly get wiped out from GST. And then till the market recovers, there's going to be a drop in terms of GST collections. So incomes of the government will reduce, incomes of companies will reduce, and there are a whole bunch of people who are what you define as daily wage earners, and all of them will also have a drop in income. So if you really think of, let's say, the taxi driver in Calcutta, or the ferryboat person who's there in Howrah, or if you look at the person who's there in the Esplanade area pulling goods on a cart and taking it from place to place, none of them have a job today. And if they don't have a job, they don't have income. Now, because of the decline which we have seen across the world, and if you look at just India's numbers, last month there was a drop of 50%. That is just in the month of March, when the lockdown started only on the 23rd, or rather on the 24th night. There was a drop of 50% in the consumption of diesel and petrol, and there was a 15% growth in the consumption of LPG, which is just reflective of what is happening in all our kitchens. And just imagine April, when the entire month was in lockdown, the drop in petrol and diesel will not be 50%, probably be in the region of 80 to 90%. So oil prices today are trading at less than $20 a barrel, what used to be between $50 and $60 a barrel at one point of time. Now, could anyone have predicted this? Nobody could have predicted this when they realized that one fish seller in the seafood market allegedly was the first person to contract the coronavirus. And that has spread across the world, and every country across the world is currently suffering the same challenges. Now, that is what I define as a black swan event, a term which was coined way back in 2007 by Nassim Taleb and who was at that point of time options trader, and then later on went on to become a New York University professor. And he said that when you cannot predict what is going to happen in the market, and something comes across which is completely unpredictable and completely unforeseeable, that is a black swan event. Now, this obviously has implications for all of us in retail, has implications on the daily consumption of products. And like Vivek ji mentioned earlier, whether it is sold through online or whether it is sold through offline, all of us today are in a position where we cannot consume to the levels that we wanted to consume in the past. And that is what we're going to be now spending time to reflect on. What we want to do is to kind of divide this into three parts. First is to understand what does COVID have as implications for retail. So the phase that we are going through, and what is the implication of this current phase on the retail business. The second part of it is, how do we plan for uncertainty? As I mentioned earlier, if people don't have the confidence to step out of their homes and get into the market and to start consuming in whichever manner, if they don't have the confidence to walk out and go to their offices because they're afraid that they might contract the virus, then obviously it will create uncertainty. And if it is going to create an uncertainty, not just in the minds of consumers, it will also create uncertainty in the minds of the government, because no government has the confidence to say that it has actually managed to contain the disease. We saw the example of Singapore, which talked about having contained the disease until there was a flare up again, and then they had to close it for another 30 days. So there is going to be uncertainty as we look into the future. So how long do we expect this closure to last? How do we plan to open as and when the closure is lifted? How do we expect the closure to be lifted? Will it be completely lifted or will it be partially lifted? How do we expect consumer confidence and sales to recover? how do we expect this recovery to reach back to where we are in the past? And even January was not a particularly good month, but even to get to January, what should we expect the consumer to do? The third part is that any event such as this has lasting changes, and lasting changes both to market structures as well as to consumers. So what are some of the market structures which are likely to get affected and change permanently into the future? What are some of the consumer behaviors which are likely to be changed on account of the experience that they've gone through now, and how will they behave in the future? What does it have in terms of implications on, say, products? What kind of products will sell? Will lower price products sell? Will online channels be the main avenue for sales? Will people buy as frequently as earlier? Will people feel confident about going out to restaurants and to malls and to multiplexes? So these are some of the changes that are likely to happen in the event that, you know, these kind of experiences create lasting changes. So these are the three broad areas that one wanted to actually reflect on in this. So let me start first with the most important challenge that we're all facing. We're all in lockdown. Our stores are closed. We have employees on our rolls. Some of them are working in stores and some of them work in offices. And what I'd like to first pose this question to Mr. Devendra Chawla is that how are we handling this employee base that we have? I don't even want to refer to it as a cost base, but it is an employee base that we have. How are we handling it? Are we retaining them? Are we selectively laying off? Are we reducing salaries? Are we actually making sure that we are able to create greater value and output out of them? Are we using this opportunity to be able to train them? So what exactly are we trying to do with employees? And DC, if you don't mind, if you can just kind of reflect on that, and then I'd probably pass it on to another person.
So
DC to start with.
Thanks, Biju. Thanks for having me, introducing me to Merchant Chambers of Commerce, and very happy to be on the platform. I think if you see our business, we have a company, Nature's Basket, based out of Mumbai, and having stores in Mumbai, Bangalore, and Pune, and Spencer's in all the other three geographies of South, East India, and North India. You see, majority of our business is essential. So we are in business right now. So there is no discussion or question of any layoff at this stage. In fact, I think our teams, our people are our biggest asset right now, who have come out in this time as a call of duty, served the nation. You see, we all joined a for-profit organization, but didn't realize one day this role will come upon us, that even in times like COVID-19, we'll be delivering essentials. So I think if anything, at our company, we feel that our staff has supported us. The staff has supported consumers. I think they're very big assets. They have learned new skills. As a company, we used to be 90% plus store sales. We've immediately morphed. Like we said, we should be a store like a platform. And, you know, borrowing from the digital landscape of ecosystems, we went into a slurry of partnerships like within first 2-3 days, because manpower was short, because and delivery people had gone back to villages. You know, the attendance started from 20-25% and now has reached 60-70%, a comfortable 60-70, because we aren't running 2 shifts depending on which state you are. Nobody's running stores for 12 hours, it's 6 hours or 8 hours, so 1 shift suffices. So that's a good enough attendance. We fell short on delivering because the world moved to e-commerce and phone delivery. And from a low single digit business, which now I've coined a term called out of store, and we'll classify sales as in store and out of store. And I think that will be the new normal. I think we are seeing currently last 10-15 days a very, very high double digit out of store sale led by phone delivery as well as e-commerce on our app. So I think our staff has also now moved in that direction. We've trained them to move from in-store to delivering out of store. We did multiple partnerships with Uber, with Zip, with Swiggy, with Rapido, with Flipkart. And we made sure that the hands and legs we were short of to deliver on deliveries, these partnerships helped us. So we moved our staff after initial days into picking and running our stores and got outsourced all these partnerships to deliver thousands and thousands, in fact, tens of thousands of orders every day, which was never the number earlier. So I think at this stage, Biju, we are so busy every day trying to ramp up our delivery numbers to make sure there are less complaints on slot being available online. And though I can still proudly say that within 2 to 3 days, we're able to deliver 90-95% of the orders. Of course, I can't deny there definitely will be some slip ups, and we are trying to address all issues. So no thought on at this stage on salary cut or layoff. I don't think we even have the time to think about it.
Sure.
Right.
So thanks, DC. But I think let me just go to Vineeth, and Vineeth has got a whole chain of stores. Vineeth, you're off. You need to come on. Okay. So Vineeth, you've got a chain of stores, and because you're in the apparel industry, what happens is that you're not allowed to open. And you've also got people on your rolls. So unlike DC, who's had the advantage that he's in the essential commodity space and consequently you're able to open stores, how do you look at the employees on your rolls at this point of time?
I think I'll address it in two ways. One is what employees mean to an organization. I think they are biggest asset of ours. And I think times like this, you take care of your assets the first. So what we're doing is obviously trying to ensure that we are able to take care of them. A large part of our store employees, so about 3,000 odd are our store employees, about 400 odd are people in the back end warehouse and offices that work. So what we're currently doing is everyone is working from home. Obviously, the store teams cannot do much, but we are doing a lot of engagement, a lot of upskilling. I think this is a good time where we have a break to upskill and train people, which we don't get otherwise. So we've started multiple engagement programs. We are training them and upskilling them. What we're also doing is we have on a daily basis ask them to fill up a survey which talks about their health, if you could support them in any part of the country, because a lot of people stay outside homes, and I think that's the biggest challenge we are facing. And large part of them have not been able to return to their homelands or home places. So we're trying to support whatever best we can in this limited situation that we have. But yes, there is a large challenge, but we are not laying off anyone currently. We are looking at the situation, and the situation looks bleak. There is obviously no revenue, and there is a large amount of cost. And you're right, people are not cost, but end of the day, you have to ensure that you are able to pay up their salaries because everyone has to look after their responsibilities. So we are doing our best to see in this limited situation of how we can handle. But our biggest thing currently is to upskill and train and engage with these people, because there's nothing else we can do today. But we are also, some people we are working with to build new business scenarios, relook at the business, relook at processes. So I think it's more about looking overall on your business and the people, and keep engagement high.
Great. Thanks, Vineeth. And I think the clear distinction that you made was that people are an asset, hence they are part of the balance sheet, and they're not a part of the P&L. And that's exactly what you said. Let me go to Jamshed and let me ask him a P&L question, which is that, at this point of time, as you know, in the retail industry, a lot of us are very poorly capitalized. We don't sit on huge amounts of cash because the margin structure for the business is such that it doesn't leave you with too much cash. And if you have to primarily support your own expansion, then whatever cash that you generate out of the business is the cash that you're going to be drawing upon in order to support your store expansion. So when you get caught in a situation such as this, where you're in a, where you either are partly open or you're fully closed, depending on which part of the business you're in. One of the most important things that we have to remember is that while stores are closed or stores are open, rent continues to tick, salaries continue to have to be paid. There are several other costs which are fixed costs. There might be a few variable costs, like say maybe electricity, air conditioning, etc., which actually you save upon. So one of the conclusions that, at least in many other businesses that they have reached, is that it's important to be able to preserve cash.
So, not an easy one, Biju, obviously. My personal view would be that one is to see what is the non-essentials that you can actually be tough on and do without. Now, to my mind,
somebody had defined that as bad costs.
Yeah.
There are good costs and there are bad costs.
Now, to the extent that having identified that, you may not be able to take immediate action on it, but at least you could have a deferral on that cost because you know that that's not a cost which is mission critical to the business. After that, within the business, there are certain costs which are related to what I call muscle, and there are certain costs which I call related to fat. For example, you are a retailer whose core business is to go into metro cities, and you've gone and opened stores in non-metro cities. And you are leaking rent out there. It was not strategic, but at that point in time, things were growing and you went there. My suggestion would be to look at fat like that and get out of it as soon as possible. I understand that if a landlord is not willing to waive rent, you still have the option of pulling out of that property, and that property is non-strategic to your business, and there is no business. I think that kind of hard calls will have to be taken on the fat side, not on the muscle side. On the muscle side, while obviously everyone is negotiating for concessions, the best is to start with a postponement of the expenditure. And in some cases, you may have to postpone the expenditure, giving a little more on the upside when an upside does take place. And I would look at my core team from that point of view. Assuming that you're running out of the cash runway. So if you have a core team of people and you have to ask them to take a salary cut, rather than just saying take a salary cut, you say you take a salary cut, say of 40%, but when things get better and we are in a good position, we'll give you back 60%, not 40. We'll give you back 60. So I think cash conservation today, with even a commitment to overdo it tomorrow, is the best way of keeping the muscle going. And the same could be with landlords. See, finally, at the end of the day, even landlords have to earn money. They have to pay for their people. They've also got people on their rolls, maintaining malls, this, that, and the other. And to merely go unilateral may be difficult. Cutting a deal by saying, look, you take bare minimum, I give bare minimum, and the differential we will manage in such a way that when there is a better upside, I will share more, but until such time you share more with me, is the one approach which I think we can do. The second, of course, is, as DC rightly pointed out, is there any way of pivoting the business model currently to see that you can keep something going? Like, I've got my friend in Sahyadri Farms, Vilas Bhai, and he is now delivering vegetables and fruit directly to homes in Bombay. He is tied up with Scootsie, and he is sending boxes to Bombay, keeping his farmers occupied, so on and so forth. It's an alternate business model. He never thought of it. He would always supply to the big players, etc., etc. Perpule, who is an IT company, has started doing home delivery. If there is any model which can be pivoted right now, even if it compromises a bit of long-term strategy, my recommendation to any retailer would be just get after it. If you have a shop, let's say you have a shop, Biju, and I'm just and it is basically selling 90% non-essentials and just a few essentials, but you've got the Shops and Establishments Act license, just switch over. Find a distributor, get the product going, but try and do as much as possible to pivot your business model to where at least you can generate some cash. That would be my sort of advice, but advice easier given, more difficult to implement in this current situation.
Thanks, Jamshed. So I think the key points that you mentioned were about first looking at arriving at some equitable participation between landlord and tenant in terms of what the rent should be, such that both sides get protected. Looking at employees and asking them to share in some of the cash burden which might be there, with the hope that we will be able to give back more than their share in the future. Third is, of course, you mentioned about the fact that you've got to be clear about what are good costs and what are bad costs, and get the bad costs out of the system, as well as look at stores which were vanity stores and those which are essential stores. And the vanity stores which we put up in the past because we felt it might be a good thing but are not making sense, even at the best of times, those stores should certainly be reviewed in terms of whether you should do that or not. And then, of course, as all retailers, the point is to be participating in the consumption opportunity and not get stuck in what exactly your retail model is. So if there is a better way to participate in the consumption opportunity, do so rather than this. So thank you. And I'd like to just swing the same question across to Mr. Nilesh. Mr. Nilesh Gupta actually runs a large chain. Do I see him here? Or is he dropped off? Nileshji, are you on the call?
Can't see him, Biju.
Yeah, he was there just now, so I was hoping to swing the same question to him. Okay, so Vineet, since you're on the line, let me take the next question to you,
Sure.
which is about, in the case of the fashion business, you've got merchandise, and merchandise has got a certain life. So while people might not think that clothes have lives, the reality is that different kinds of clothes have got different lives depending on when exactly they're present. So if you've got something which is for the summer collection, obviously it won't sell as much during the winter season. And you have to plan in advance in terms of what designs you think will sell and what quantities will sell, and plan that for the season, which is the physical summer season. And at the end of it, if it doesn't sell, you've got to figure out what to do. Either discount it or pack it up and keep it for next year's summer, and then start bringing in your new merchandise for the winter season. Now, this summer, we've actually got affected pretty much from the beginning of March till probably the beginning of May clearly. And after May, we're not even sure how long the impact will last. It can be a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, etc. In this kind of a difficult situation to plan and predict, how do you want to handle your merchandise? What do you want to do with your merchandise? Because merchandise is going to be a very critical part of the capital that the company has, which is the inventory. And you want to convert the balance sheet item into a P&L item, which is cash.
I think Jamshed said it right. The main thing is to conserve cash currently, and I think that's what we are all trying to do, ensure as much cash we can conserve. So I think in any fashion business, the largest amount of cash is deployed in capital is deployed in product, which is the garments, because we have a very large cycle where we buy in advance and then we wait for sales for pretty much many more months, and then the new season comes in. And yes, the garments have life and they get out of fashion very, very quickly. Especially with product, depending on which part of the fashion chain you are. If we are in the fast fashion, then obviously it's running up much faster, and the life cycle is much more smaller. So we have majority of our brands in the same segment, which is the fast fashion. So I think good part is that we are not in Europe and we are in India. So I think it's a little bit easier for us to handle the situation than the other parts of the world where the weather is changing very, very fast. Predominantly in India, the weather does not change till November late, and a large part of our country still keeps seeing decent amount of summer and the heat. So it's pretty much possible for a large part of our businesses to carry forward the collection to spring, to autumn. And I think till about Diwali, we will see a large part of these products being moved. So I think what we can do, we have done as a value chain, is that we have cancelled orders in the autumn part of the business, and try to push whatever we could because garment as a life cycle is very long. So you have liabilities on fabrics. So you try to see what products can you push down the value chain and you can get it later as and when the demand keeps going up. The challenging part is that the demand is not going to come 100% when we start also. So it's about forecasting what we will be able to consume, what you have in the stores, what you have in the warehouse, what's there in the factories, what's ready. And I will say pretty much if you have products which have longer seasonalities, if you can even push it to spring 21, because it's purely about conserving cash and it's not about currently looking at, oh, let's liquidate it. And because liquidation also costs money. And today you need to control that money because discounts also come out of money. So what we are doing is we have started to look at the entire, so we've clubbed 2 seasons to 1. So there's no spring, there's no autumn, winter, there is 1 season now, which is 2020. And then obviously winter we will have to buy because that predominantly is a change of weather and the north part of the country it gets quite cold. And there we will have to, and I think looking at how we've reset the environment button by having no pollution, and you can see the Himalayas in Jalandhar, there's going to be pretty much decent amount of cold this year also. So hopefully that should also be a big reason for people to buy winter, and I think also to demand to come back. So we are buying and going ahead and buying winter products, but all other products have been pushed to the value chain. Yes, fast fashion is good, but I think all of us are stuck in the same. And I was speaking to someone internationally, and they said a lot of spring 21 is going to look like spring of 20, because that's the real fact. Because you look at European partners, the winter is going to start in from June, and they have seen a whole of summer with no products on store being sold. So they have to actually put these products up for spring 21. And I think we are at least protected from that part because the winter sets in very, very late. So again, conserve the cash, push the products as much as you can. Yes, there will be requirement of some discounting, some campaigns, because we will have to pull in demand. But there's nothing going to happen initially in the first 1.5, 2 months. So we should be cautious about that. Just because in June we go on EOSS and July we go on EOSS, we need to press in that button. I don't think so. And when you have less footfalls, it is better that you use the opportunity to do full price and not discount, because if 100 becomes 80, then we all lose money. If 100 becomes 140 by doing a promotion, then it's fine for all of us. So I think we need to be very, very cautious in this and be smart. It's not about looking at how we used to do business. This is a new era, a new world, and all of us need to reset our business models. We look at, I think it's good is that we have been given an opportunity to reset our business a little bit. And I think we should all use this opportunity wisely. Can we change 100%? Answer is no. Can we tweak at least the 15-20% of challenges which we had? Yes, the opportunity lies. And I think that's what we should utilize this time to relook at and relook at the entire value chain in that perspective. And fashion and garments are a big part of that value chain.
So what I understand from you, Vineet, is the fact that while there are challenges in terms of trying to figure out what to do, we can't lose sight of the larger objectives of the business of serving customers and their needs. So during winter, we have to make sure that we have enough for the winter season, and we have to be able to extract the maximum that we can from whatever is left of the summer season. And it is not an easy thing to just assume that you can discount and everything will move off your shelves, because you're not the only one who will be doing it. There'll be several others who are also doing the same thing. So it will become a bit of a bloodbath in the market if that really were to happen. We have Mr. Nilesh Gupta back again connected now. Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for rejoining. And one of the questions I wanted to pose to you was a question that I had asked Jamshed earlier, which was all about the fact that in this business today, one of the biggest challenges that all of us as retailers have is that how do we finally conserve cash that we have with us? Because if you're not able to sell, you have no revenues and you have costs. Some are fixed costs, some are variable costs, some are reducible costs, some are not reducible costs. Then we have inventory, and inventory sits with us. And with the inventory which is sitting with us, we've got to understand what should we be doing as and when the market has an opportunity to open up, and how do we convert that inventory into cash. So what are some of the thoughts that you have? Because these are challenges that a lot of the retailers on this panel actually have. And I can see it from the questions that are getting posed to me, stating that, how do we finally handle cash, which is the most important ingredient in the business?
Thank you, Biju. I think most important is we are traveling in a ship with real stormy and choppy waters. So what any good captain does is just throws off all the excess baggage onto the sea in order to be able to sail. I think that has to be our principle right now. And I think today we should not be thinking of sales this year. For the simple reason is, at least in my category, consumer durables, the sales is going to be very minimum because the amount of job losses, the salary cuts I'm seeing. So all discretionary spending is going to go off. So I think the target for each and every retailer for this year should be only to be able to survive, stay afloat. If we are able to do that, I think nothing will stop us to get back into the growth once COVID is behind us, and it will be behind us sooner or later. If not sooner, definitely in the next 7, 8, 10 months, whatever it is. And most important is, I think now all businesses, whether retail or otherwise, even spending 100 rupees, they should ask, is it necessary? If not, don't spend. That's, I think, the major mantra. In fact, already I've started receiving mails or articles which says people who spent in advertising and brand building during such times, when the sales were not there in 2008 and all, when the markets opened, at that time they grew by 300, 400%, and the others grew by 50, 70%. I feel that's all paid mails which are coming in, paid articles which are coming in. Today is not a time for brand building, it's not a time for advertising, it's a time to stay put. Just spend your money where it's needed. And on this account, I would say one thing to everybody: do not touch your team, your employees first. Because I think they are the most vulnerable. So everybody feels, let's do a salary cut, let's do a job cut. I think this is a time when the team needs us more than we need them. And they have always been there when we have needed them. And I think the team reduction, a layoff should not be there at all. And if reduction is to be needed, that also should be the last resort on your chart. That's the last tick which you should do. And that also, according to me, you should not do it. You can possibly say, okay, we'll make a deferred payment, but your salaries are intact. And I think there are a lot of other things. In fact, it's an opportunity for all of us, because as we do business, as the business grows, as we open more stores, there's a lot of flack which we build in. I think this is a time to remove all that flack forever.
Good. So I think, sorry, Vineet's got a point.
I
just
think,
ask
yeah,
him to add to it.
Yeah, I think today is the time to test your brand. I think all the brand building you've done forever, I think it's time to test that. Has it really worked, not worked? Because if you're still not in the consumer mind, then I'm sure it's not going to ever be there in the consumer mind. Yes, we should definitely engage. There's a lot of digital possible, but I think I agree with Nilesh. It's not time to market. It's time to test your brand, how strong you are in the consumer mind. That's all I wanted to add.
So let me just swing to DC. DC, you don't have a challenge with having to keep stores and keep employees. Your challenge is that employees are not enough to be able to run stores, or how to appropriately match employees. So when you reflect on your business at this point of time, how do you look at the future in terms of, should I expand my business? Because you don't have a constraint about opening stores. So should you now use this opportunity to be able to sign up new leases, expand your business, look at new investments that you'd like to make? Because in your case, cash still comes into the system, maybe not as much as before, but it's still coming in. But there might be opportunities that you see in the market which you won't be normally seeing at any other point of time.
Thanks, Biju. And let me also start from what Vineet said. See, we also have a fashion business, and 30-40 of our business is actually non-essential. So on that side, there definitely remains a challenge. Because essentials is more than half, we are able to utilize the total manpower towards essential. But the high margin business of general merchandise and apparel, we have a brand called To Be Me at Spencer, and it's a couple of hundreds of crores, has of course becomes because we are not selling that. So, And even in essentials, please understand, first 1 week and 10 days was by and large staples, the basic staple like oil, sugar, rice, wheat, which are very, very low margin. It's not as if the very high margin people were not buying dark chocolates or, high margin ice creams. Even cold supply chain was a challenge. So even essential retailers will get hit on margins because the fashion margin and the general merchandise margin is gone. So I think going to what Jamshed said, I think conserving cash is the mantra. Definitely, we are able to open 90% plus of our stores from our 200 stores. Definitely, there are thousands of feet on the ground making deliveries. But in terms of capexes or new store opening, I think we'll relook and make sure, unless we are comfortable and out of this situation, I think we also need to make sure that we conserve cash. So it's not cash is coming because essentials is running, but we need to take assessment of how long this will last and how long the other profitable business will come back in to make those investment decisions on capex and more store opening. It sounds simpler that the moment you say you're in essentials, people think, oh, these guys, of course, are in business, but it's not so
Raking in money.
These are a challenge. And like one state in UP, stores are not running from day one of lockdown from 23rd. So we have a large number of stores in UP. They're absolutely shut. Now, whatever home delivery or e-commerce app through which you do, it will never make up for the complete business which was there. So I think within these challenges, conserving cash is still on the top of the mind, even for us.
So one of the points you mentioned, DC, was about, as and when the market opens up. And technically today we have a date of May 3rd when the market is expected to open up. There have been, in the past, what we have seen is that there have been such dates and deadlines which have been placed. But as you know, that these are challenges that the government has to face, and it has to balance between whether I think new infection rates are actually slowing down, have we flattened the curve, and lots of other technical jargon around the pandemic. But all of that then implies whether the government has the confidence to be able to open stores. Now, assume that we open stores from the 3rd of May. How do you look at actually opening stores, and what does it translate to? Because when we step out, if we were to open a house door and step out onto the road, it is an uncertain situation. Some days we are pleasantly surprised when there is no traffic, and some days we are disappointed when there is too much traffic. Some days we are happy when the weather is good, and some days we are disappointed when either it is raining or it is too hot. So it is very similar to that. When you start, you have to figure out what are the variables, what are the variables which are there outside, and whether those mean well for our businesses or not. So what is your expectation on how things are likely to pan out as in when we open?
So very difficult one, Biju, but I'm going to give it a shot.
Give it some scenario planning. This is likely to happen. Nobody has an exact science to this.
So actually, we are on scenario planning. We've made a couple of scenarios. If this happens, then what? If this happens in the BCP, what is the business continuity plan? We have a full document right now in which we run the whole company. But I can tell you, for such an unprecedented event like COVID-19, I think even consumers are how they will behave even after May 3rd, 4th, assuming, let's say, we are allowed to step out, and I don't even know malls will be allowed, or which part will be allowed, or which restaurant, if at all, or how many people will be allowed to go to the office in percentages. I think that definitely in the early days, people won't be like rushing out just because they're sick and tired of sitting at home and they want like to step out. I think people will be cautious. So it might be a slow consumer recovery, even though it might be like in the past of SARS or MERS or the flu. I'm hearing more, and I'll gravitate more towards, though none of us know, towards a V-shaped recovery as of now. If mid-May things go back to normal. But I think consumer reaction will totally be unprecedented, Biju. So I think no company can afford right now to not have various scenarios. For us running stores, we are already open 90% plus stores. So for us, May 4th only mean opening 10% more stores. Like 100% of our Nature's Basket is open from the last 3 weeks in Mumbai and Pune and Bangalore. So practically what it means for us is going from 6 to 7 hours of store opening back to 10 to 12 hours. Like we'll need more people to report back to work so we can go back to 2 shift is what it means. So that kind of planning will be required. Now we are sitting with the spring summer collection, and as Vineet said, we've also deferred pending unfinished fabric, and the order we're trying to convert it to fall winter, or let's say winter, and revising the styles using the same fabric. I think we are critically reviewing autumn winter inventory of which we had placed order, and only key product lines like which will be required, like festive wear or winter wear. I think lead times are very worrisome. We don't see MSME apparel factories being run right now. It's such a small. I think the numbers which we need may not even turn up. I think winter season may start. Getting inventory would be like September. So like Vineet said, earlier merchandise which you would do on EOSS will become the full merchandise. And I think as an immediate step, what people need to consume every day is basics and core, a little away from high fashion. And we can afford to, because we are a hypermarket. We're not a fashion store. People don't come to us for a very high fashion because we are also selling groceries as essential. So we can afford to move a larger mix into essentials core for some couple of seasons, or let's say 2 to 3 quarters, and judge how consumer sentiment is back on full fashion. I think so. That's where we are, Viju. And a scenario of the lockdown or people not coming out for longer, even if let's say the lockdown is opened up, but people want to remain in self lockdown or don't come out, and that would be a difficult situation, I think, for everyone.
Sure. So if I were to understand what you said that opening up does not, there is no clear picture about what opens up, because it can be some cities open, some don't open, some localities open, some don't open.
Yeah, depending on spots, which all areas. Absolutely.
Correct, exactly. So sometimes high streets may be open, but malls which actually where a lot of people congregate might not be open. So that is one challenge. So you want to know how much it will translate to in terms of consumer demand. On the other side, even your suppliers, you're not even sure how they will scale and open up. And so that is the second challenge that you're going to be facing. Third is that you have an inventory challenge, and you got to be flexible in terms of understanding how to be able to adapt inventory to the requirements of the marketplace. And the fourth part of it is that how does all of this translate in terms of business continuity? And does this finally mean that you're able to run your business? Do you need additional equity funding? Do you need to borrow more money from the banks? All of that will also will have implications in terms of how the front end pans out, which is completely unpredictable. And may I just swing to Jamshed on the same question, because you come from a group which has got interests in hospitality, which is the Taj group of hotels and Ginger and everything else. You've got a group which has interests in aviation, which is both AirAsia as well as Vistara. You've got a group which has got investments in retail, both direct retail, which is, between Trent Hypermarkets plus Westside, Zudio, plus a lot of other companies which are there in retail like Titan, etc. And also companies like Tata Consumer Products, which are continuing to serve customers in terms of, whether it's beverages, salt, spices, those kind of items. So when you look at it from a larger group perspective, and when you look at this period of May onwards, then how do you, it's easy for us to sometimes just think about our own industry, which is a retail industry. But if you were to venture a guess as a quasi chairman of the Tata Group, if I were to elevate you to that, then how would you see this panning out?
See, I'll tell you, I think there are two clusters which are there, Biju, as far as this diversified group of us is concerned. The first cluster, I'll put aviation and hospitality, because the two of them are linked. As far as aviation and hospitality is concerned, I think it will be completely driven. So hospitality largely will be driven by aviation, and aviation will be driven by regulation. But I feel that there is certainly necessary travel which needs to take place. And once aviation opens, that necessary travel will take place. it will be at a much higher cost because it will be restricted. And to that extent, the hospitality sector will have to gear up to absorb that bit of essential travel. However, in hospitality, the model will have to pivot around to catering to local populations a lot more than actually relying on long distance and short haul traffic coming in. Now, that's not going to be easy, but that's the way forward. When I took over as Chief Operating Officer of Indian Hotels, 2 months into my job, we had 9/11. And we had this entire scenario where nobody wanted to fly. And how do we pivot the business around to create both resort experiences and city experiences within a very tight geographical area? And I don't see any other way out of that. But having said that, hotels which are more upmarket, I think will perhaps be seen as safer. And to my mind, customers will be willing to pay more to stay in hotels such as these than to necessarily go to the budget hotels that they were going earlier. So I feel that in hospitality, there will be an upgrading from an individual point of view, and we need to be geared to that with good pricing models to make sure that we are taking this in the wake as time comes. Coming on the retail front, companies like, I personally feel that customers will want to have assured shopping experiences, which is that, first of all, they would like to have a 360-degree access to a product. Whichever way they want the product, they would like to see it and have it. But they will like to have assured shopping experiences. And the more companies can assure them that the shopping experience is safe and hygienic and yet caters to the need to shop, you can't make it so safe that they can't access product, I think customers will gravitate towards those kind of shops. And therefore, the credibility of the Tata brand obviously helps here. But I would urge companies today to start thinking about how to give that assurance. Apparel, according to me, has the biggest challenge because there's the highest product contact in apparel, and therefore apparel will have to be the most innovative. Others slightly less so, but even things like jewelry, etc., will have to start looking at how do we give this assurance to the customers through concrete steps and not through merely saying that, oh, don't worry, we're sure. Customers are willing to take a risk depending on the criticality of the item. Today, in all of food retail, customers are taking a risk. Let's face it. I mean, there's no question about it. They are taking a risk because there's a risk return. In categories which are nice to have, the risk return will start dropping off, as a result of which the assurance levels have to be much, much higher. And that assurance level will have to be for assuring that the entire supply chain is safe and not only the store environment is safe. See, today, for example, in food retail, we are not giving any assurance that the supply chain is safe. We are only talking about the shop and, all this fever and temperature check we are doing. So I think it's long yards, but companies who start thinking along these lines and getting some sort of digital solutions around these lines, I think will be able to take the sort of slow upswing in a much better place. That's what I feel is likely to happen.
Okay. Let me swing this question to Nilesh, because, he comes from a business which is typically inventory heavy. He comes from a business where roughly a large part of his business actually has a supply chain which originates out of China, and products are coming in from China. What we are likely to see, at least certainly in terms of sentiment, when we start, will be a slight anti-Chinese sentiment, and I don't want to define that in any percentage form, but it will all depend on the customer. So you have a challenge, which is that you've got your own inventory. You consumer durables, when people come in to buy, Is it that they're going to start immediately buying high-end refrigerators, air conditioners, or will they buy brown goods, or will they buy accessories, or will they buy work-from-home products like say laptops and dongles and things like that? On the one hand, you're not sure what exactly they're going to be buying when they come in. The second thing is that you're not even sure how the supply chain will scale up as in when you open up. So between what you're selling versus what you're having available, you're not sure whether that match is going to happen because a lot of the supply chain comes from outside of India. So how do you see the scenario when the market opens up?
Basically, supply side will not have an issue, consumer durable industry, for the simple reason is everybody overstocked in the last 1 month, not 1 month prior to the COVID, a month prior to the COVID lockdown happened. The simple reason was COVID started in December in China, and no one thought that COVID is going to be a worldwide phenomenon and it will come to India also. So when it started in China, the factories in China were shutting down, and we were entering into summer season. Summer accounts for your air conditioners and refrigerators, a very, very big season for us. So all of us overstocked. Number one, every category, because as you rightly said, all our products are coming in from China. So not only did we overstock on refrigerators and air conditioners, but even on mobiles, LEDs, everything, assuming that there would be a disruption in supply. But so stocking will not be an issue. But as far as when we open up, there's going to be a latent demand, which is already being generated on telephone by all our consumers because somebody's TV has conked out, somebody's refrigerator is not working, somebody's AC is not cooling as much as it should. So what we are going to see as and when we open, this need-based demand is going to come in. But post that, there would be a tapering of the demand because I think nobody is going to buy upgrade. In our business, 60-70% is upgrade. People are going to wait and see the situation, if they are entrepreneurs, how their business is shaping up, if they are working, whether the jobs is safe or not, whether the salaries are sacrosanct. And I think a lot of other things they would want to keep. So discussion is spread. So we expect a little lower down in our business after the initial uprise, which will happen because of the need-based. And to all the apparel guys, although I'm not in apparel, but what DC said, possibly we may have a shortage of supply because the factories are not working. My take on this is it is better to err on having less stock and losing customers rather than to stock more and maybe the customers may not be there. So this is the only time when I think as a retailer, I would feel I'm more happier in a situation where the stock is not there and the customer was there.
Okay. I think a couple of people have to leave because they've got other calls. So let me just swing this question to DC. What are some irreversible changes that you would see in the future?
I think the whole digital economy gets a big fillip. I think e-commerce will get a fillip. People spending more digitally, people spending, I think, more time even on OTTs for me, over the top channels. I think digital meetings, as somebody said, that does everybody need to be in the office? You suddenly realize that we all grew up that everybody has to report to the office every day. You just realize some things, some cost on travel definitely can be cut. I think it's reversible in terms of that a certain percentage shift will definitely move to digital shopping and app-based. And it doesn't matter which industry you are. I think learning has already moved. My kids are having class, even in senior standards, every day for 6 hours digitally. I think and it's seamless. Even they are surprised. They never thought it will work, but it's all working. I think it's opened up. I think, and organizations have to pivot. And we used to always speak in retail that physical retail have to move to more experiential, because if you just do what you were doing yesterday, that won't suffice. But I think now omni-channel becomes a need of the hour. It's not just something good to do. I think the current times are crying that if you're not omni-channel, I think that'll be a problem. I think clearly for me, that's an irreversible.
Vineet, what would be your thoughts on this?
So I think I have two thoughts. One, I think I agree. Omni is a given, but I think more than Omni, hyper local is what will become much more important. I think, especially from a fashion perspective, grocery was still hyper local, but I think fashion was not hyper local. So they need to become hyper local immediately, because maybe a customer doesn't want to come to your shopping center, but you can actually deliver to the store, to his house or wherever he wants, or they can come and collect, which the interaction reduces, and then you can try to do some contactless delivery, which I don't think is fully contactless, but yeah, it's still better than the entire experience in the store. I think I will say one big change which I foresee is experience will become much more important now, because you need to have a specific reason to go to the stores. Because if you can do the same thing online, then you don't need to go to the store. So people will want more experience. They will definitely want that, and the demands will increase much more. I think our store people also need to become much more digital savvy. Relationships will become much more important. It's just more about transaction, because that's you're doing it now. Also, had essentials been non-essentials been open, we would have seen online transactions happening. But I think so relationship driven. I think this is very, very going to be very important. Third, I think everyone has to think in the post-COVID situation, how will we assure safety for our consumers and employees? And employees are also going to demand it, and so are consumers going to demand it. You said it right. Garments are a very, very high interaction. You try them and stuff. So I think we'll have to find new ways to handle this situation. These free deliveries, free exchange, free returns. I think they are going to get challenged for a while. Good part, which I wanted to speak when they were saying about high fashion. We have 7,000 stores in China. 70% of our business in brick and mortar is back in 6 weeks. We opened some stores in Europe, which were high streets. Malls are still not open. 35% of business is back in 1 week. So I think consumers will remain consumers, and I think we have a very large chunk of youngsters who will love to come and shop back, and I hope that happens. So maybe 60 days is a tough one, but post 60 days till Diwali, I think we should be able to pull back. So I think we should gear up. There was a question from the participants also, attendees also. I said the same. We need to gear up for Diwali and post Diwali, the winter, because I don't think we should lose opportunity, and we should. Though Nileshji said that it's better that the stores customers go back, but I will say every opportunity to get cash out of the pocket of the consumer is so much important, because the cash is anyways short today. And if the customer wants to spend, I need to ensure that I am able to fulfill that, and obviously keep working towards how to manage inventory. And I think that's our jobs, and it gets tougher every day to be more sharp on inventory than before.
So Vineet, I think the contrasting views between you and Nileshji is that you all are in two different businesses.
No, I agree.
Your margin structure on a product is very different from Nileshji's margin structure on a product he sells in his store. So he knows if it doesn't sell, it'll bite him quickly. But you know that if it doesn't sell, you can still afford it because you got a pretty good margin structure.
I can tell you, Nileshji, there's going to be so much white goods selling. I can tell you, all of us are in dire need of some more appliances. So as soon as you open up, you will see a big swing for sure. I think that helps.
That's like as Namitji mentioned earlier, that when the men get into the kitchen, that's when they realize that there are so many things that the women were managing without. And hence we need to do that.
So even for household, for cleaning, I don't know, vacuum cleaners, dishwasher, I think people are going to buy here. They will find the money. I am sure there'll be a lot of EMIs you will be offering, but they will buy it.
So this brings me to the last question, because I know we are running out of time. DC, I know, has to leave because he's actually he's got a running business, so he's got to get into that. So DC, thank you very much for participating.
Thank you so much,
and look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you very much for this. But I'll just leave the questions to the others. If we were to actually look at what's happened so far, what we are seeing is in terms of government response. Neighboring Bangladesh, they have given money to garment factory workers. In Kerala state, they have given money to consumers directly. In Europe, of course, you pretty much don't have to work. Even then, you will still comfortably exist. You are filing jobless claims in North America, and the government is actually giving you $1,200. So what is it that we expect the government to do for us? When we look at the government doing, look at it from three perspectives. One is, what should government do for business in order to be able to help support business to exist? Second part of it is, what should government do for consumers to give them confidence and to encourage them to come and spend? The third is, what should government do in terms of strengthening the supply chains such that all of us can work off a well-lubricated supply chain? And Jamshed, may I start with you, because you've spent a lot of time with RAI in terms of working on several of these government memorandum.
See, I tell you, I've attended a couple of meetings even with ministers like Gadkari and Piyush Goyal. The government's view is quite clear that at any benefit or any concession that they want to give to the country has to have three stakeholders involved. One is industry itself and its workers, etc., etc. The second is the banks and the financial system, because there is a big concern that that should not collapse in giving out all these loans. And the third is the government. To my mind, the government's first priority ought to be to put money in the hands of the poor and those who are suffering. I think, I'm not even talking from an economic point of view, I'm only talking from a humanitarian point of view. Because if that humanitarian crisis is not resolved or not mitigated, I don't think any other steps would really benefit the economy. The people must have money in their hands, and they must have the confidence to return back into the labor market so that any progress or any production or any growth that we want can take place. I think that's the first thing. The second is, my personal view is that sector-specific help won't be forthcoming from the government. I think it will be general sort of SOPs and incentives given, which essentially will favor small businesses. I think the government's mood currently is that they don't want to give concessions in a blanket fashion which benefit large, medium, small, everybody, the haves as well as the have-nots. And they are more keen to try and push money into the have-nots as much as possible and requesting the so-called haves to manage for some point in time until such time that things get better. That's their approach. And I think that's the balance that they want to provide, which is why the focus on MSME will be much more. But if large industries are as industrial houses are asking for SOPs, obviously the government is not going to do that. To my mind, the big thing that the government and private sector should work on, and I think they've already started this, is to completely reimagine Make in India. Completely. I mean, I feel that, we spoke a lot about what will happen at the customer end and customer experience end and all that. And I think over the next 1 or 2 years, customers will also reach some sort of equilibrium, and we'll figure that out. But I think the biggest shift will happen in the way supply chains are structured all over the world. Because people have now realized that they cannot have supply chains which are vulnerable across countries and supply chains which are vulnerable even within the country. And that reimagining of the supply chain gives us a huge opportunity on Make in India. And if that is done by the government, I think in the medium term, the economy will get a real kicker. That would be my overall assessment of how government and industry will interact.
Let me take a slightly different sectoral approach, and that is Nileshji. So if you were to go back to the government, you've been in the consumer electronics industry for many, many decades. And you've seen this industry grow from local to international, back again to local. You've seen mobile phones from large MNCs like Nokia move to large Chinese players, etc. So how do you expect the government to react? And what would be your expectation from the government? You're muted.
No, someone will have to unmute.
Hello. Yeah. So one thing is for sure, as Mr. Jamshed has said, government is not going to dole out money like a few other developed countries' government. It cannot also. So we should not be expecting that. But as far as our sector is concerned, I think the best thing what the government can do is to reduce the GST rates. Now, that's from government perspective, they'll say we need more money and how can we reduce? Because our industry has always delivered more revenue when the GST rates goes down. In fact, before the lockdown happened, we had an increase of GST from 12% to 18% in mobile phones. I think that is one thing which it should be reversed immediately. Because if you see in today's lockdown moment at times, mobile and laptops are a necessity. But beyond that, I'm not asking for reduction for any other reason, is because there is definitely going to be a loss of sale. Even after we open, the markets are not going to be what they were. And so in order to compensate, if the government reduces the GST, we will definitely give them more revenue in rupee terms. This is one part for my industry specifically. Secondly, from retail perspective, I think what we can expect or we should be expecting from the government is, in certain areas, if they can reduce the GST, like rentals. Because there, at the end of the day, it's going to be, as it is, whatever rentals any retailer was paying, he's not going to be able to afford that because the sales is going to be reduced drastically. So on one hand, we'll be talking with landlords to reduce the rentals. At the same time, if the government helps in reducing, and I'm not saying it's a blanket, maybe they say only for 6 months, we are halving the GST rates to 9% instead of 18%. I think these are the steps, if these are proactive steps where the government will not lose revenue in rupee term, yes, as percentage, and it becomes a softener to the industry.
Sure, thanks. Vineet, I know that you have to leave, so do you want to have a last comment in this, which is the last question?
I think from our industry perspective, the only ask to government is to provide capital. I think there's a lot of discussion about capital, but I don't think the banks are ready to take risks. Actually, they've become much more risk averse. So the larger organization and industrial companies are definitely maybe getting capital, but capital is not available for small to medium time companies like ours. It's very, very tough. And also, I think the big challenge is, and I will talk about the overall fashion, we already have leveraged balance sheets. So I don't think the companies can afford, though I am not talking about profitability currently, it's about sustaining. So cash is required, but the capital needs to be available at a much cheaper rate. Look at what Bangladesh has done, or even Pakistan, who does not have money, they're borrowing money every day. They are giving out employee salary loans to companies to pay out salaries. And I'm only talking about salaries because these are people we need to protect. And if we do not protect them, it's going to be a social problem for the government itself. So I am not saying give us capital to buy more products, open more stores. That's fine. But I think what Bangladesh government has done is something which I think we should learn. And I think our government, it's our neighbor, and their economy is not as strong as ours, although I know our challenges on the economy. And I hope that Jamshedji, when he's next time he's there, look at what Bangladesh has done. They are giving salary loans at 2% rate for companies, and there is no payment required for 6 months, and then you can pay back in 2 years. And I think that can definitely help us save jobs, save the economy, because end of the day, if people get money, they're going to spend this money. Those people are not saving money. They are going to spend money on grocery necessities and essentials. And I think that way the government will get GST back and stuff, and then it will kickstart the economy. Because if we all start deferment of salaries, and I'm only saying we are not very far away from it. Few of our senior leadership has already taken such deferment, and we will have to now pass it on to much more people in the organization. That is anyways going to impact the government and the collections. So I think we need to figure out ways to support this people. And I think people, especially people like ours in the stores, our suppliers, whom we are not able to pay because they also have employees, they have labor who are not getting paid. I think if the government comes up with that kind of support, I think that's what we require. We don't require capital for growth. We don't require capital for capex and stuff, for buying products. We require capital today to protect people's jobs. As Neeraj said, we need to pay them so that they can in turn support the economy and support their life.
So good. Thanks, Vineet. So what we are getting to see from all of this is that there is a requirement to be able to support the customer, either reduce GST, lower the cost, so that customers are incentivized to buy. Look at it from the perspective of being able to support the customer in terms of confidence by making direct cash payments to them directly through the employers, who would be all of us. and do it in the form of low cost loans. We're looking at being able to extend additional financing to companies in a low cost manner, such that companies have the ability to be able to support all costs, whether it is suppliers or it is with employees. We also earlier talked about the fact that specific segments, which are like MSME segments, are segments of industry which the government also is looking at. Government earlier had given a PF concession to those who are less than 100. Today's news is that they will also extend it to those who have more than 100 employees, but of course, caveat being less than 15,000 in terms of salary, which is a very small part of anybody's employment. So these are some of the things that we were expecting from the government. I know that we have run well ahead of schedule. I have both Manish and Namit on the call. So what we'd like to do is to close at this stage. There are a whole bunch of questions which have come up, but some of those questions have been answered privately by the panelists themselves. If there's anything which is left over, we can get them to respond later. And many of the questions have already been covered in the questions that I had asked and the answers provided. So Namit and Manish, if you all could just take over from here.
Yeah, it was really a very productive and informative session. I know we have run out of time, but still a lot of questions has been answered. So without any further ado, I'll request Manish Gorisaria, who is a co-chairman in the retail committee, to propose a vote of thanks. Manish.
Good afternoon, friends. On behalf of MCCI and its managing committee, I wish to propose a vote of thanks to all of you for this great session. Special thanks to Mr. Biju Kurian for leading and moderating this wonderful session. It has given deep insight into the subject for all of us. I must also thank our esteemed panelists, Mr. Jamshed Dabu, Mr. Devendra Chawla, Mr. Lilesh Gupta, and Mr. Vineet Gautam for their stimulating participation, which I know have been very rewarding to all of us. I also thank all our MCCI members and attendees for joining the session in large numbers and gaining benefit. Lastly, I hope that this lockdown ends soon and we all get back to our normal routine work. Thank you once again. Thank you, Mr. Biju.
Thank you. Thanks
thank
a lot.
to all the esteemed
Thanks, Viju. Thanks,
Thank you.
Jamshed. Thanks, Nilesh.
Thank you,
Manish and
Bye. Bye. Bye,
to all the panelists once again.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you to the
Bye.
MC.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Lesji. Special thanks to you.
Yeah.